Welcome to the 28 Minutes of Sanity podcast. This is JJ. We are glad you are here. Paul is here. Paul, my wife wants to know, how did your blood draw go this morning?
Blood draw? I didn't have a blood draw.
You did something. You jumped in line in front of her at the clinic.
No.
She's not happy. She is not happy.
I had physical therapy appointment, and I did jump in front of her, but it was not my fault because the other desk waved at me to come over, and all I needed to do was get a cool sticker.
I will tell her that it's the other desk fault. So, Paul, glad you're here. We're glad you're here watching and listening. As I said, this is 28 Minutes of Sanity. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can, at 28MIN of Sanity. I really do want you to follow us. We're getting really close to double digits on followers. We hit 8 today, thanks to Jamie. So we're climbing the charts real fast. If you watch this and you have a comment for us, good, bad, indifferent, criticism, a question, whatever it is, send us a note, 28minutesofsanity at gmail.com. We are excited today to have Jeremy with us. Jeremy is our new corporate sponsor. He's funneling huge amounts of money into our organization, and that's why he's on here. Jeremy, how are you?
I'm doing really good, JJ.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you. Jeremy, who are you real quick? What's the deal? Why are you here?
I am Jeremy Vlcek. I reside in Chapman, Nebraska. I'm originally an Omaha person that moved here because I married my wife, Christina, and we started going to church here about 12 years ago. And 7 years ago, I was saved, and the rest is history from there. And here I am with the JJ Springer and Paul.
All right. Well, Jeremy, we are glad you're here. I know that Paul and I are both happy to count you as a friend, and just as we do this podcast, the ideas we talk about, we want to be talking about them with just among friends. Just have this thing have kind of a natural flow to it, and so thanks for coming on. We're gonna do a couple of things. One, big news. I already mentioned that we're closing in on 10 Twitter followers, so we're getting pretty big that way. We also, let me be the first to announce, we have an international following. I had somebody from the Bahamas reach out to me and inquire about the podcast. And so we're not just confined to the U.S. I will tell you that it is my Aunt Carol. So Aunt Carol, glad you're watching and listening. I do have a job for you. I need you to get your son, my cousin Brian, to follow us on Twitter. Okay, so Carol, that's your assignment if you're watching. But in all seriousness, Aunt Carol, love you. Glad you're checking us out. We're looking at a new feature here, and we're going to call it Fake Viewer Mail. Okay, so we're going to start out. Nobody's sent us an email yet, have they, Paul?
They have not.
Not even
unless
the spammers?
They went to spam. No.
Okay.
We need more spammers.
All right. If we get good spam, let me know. We can even, you got to start somewhere, and maybe we'll start. Like a step up would be getting some spam to respond to. So for now, it's just fake viewer mail. So
and not only that, with our new app, what's it called? Apple Podcast, because I don't use it. You can give us a 5-star review whether you liked it or not, because even if it's bad, it's good.
Yeah. In all seriousness, I was going to mention that Paul did the work of getting us onto a hosting service this week. Understand that not everyone has time to sit and watch us on YouTube. And so if you want to subscribe, just be able to listen to us, you can do that through Apple. You can do that through Spotify. You can do that through Stitcher. You can do that through that thing that Google used to have, so you could watch blogs that went away like 10 years ago. Do we have that one?
I don't know what it's called. There's like Google Podcasts.
Okay.
But then there's also, did you already say Audible?
I did not say Audible. No.
Yeah, that's kind of weird to have it on that, because you think that would be books, but they have podcasts too.
Really? This podcast is better than books, so we're on Audible. But now let's get back to business. Fake viewer mail. Nobody is asking, what other podcasts do you listen to? So I want to hear from you guys. Don't tell us all of them. Like, I could make a whole show out of this, so I'm just going to try and pick a couple. But what do you guys listen to? Or do you?
That's a tough question. I listen to, it's not really a podcast. It's more of a YouTube channel.
Fine.
Uh,
We'll count it.
John Lovell on Warrior Poet Society.
What is it?
John Lovell on Warrior Poet Society.
Okay.
He's a firearms instructor, but he does a lot of missions trips and has a lot of good, podcast interviews about, dealing with violence in the world or just how to walk with Christ, that type of thing.
Really? Okay.
Being a warrior, but a good
What's
one.
it called?
Warrior Poet Society.
Warrior Poet Society.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Jeremy, are you a podcast guy?
Yeah,
I mean, you're on one.
I'm on one right now. I watch Entree Leadership.
Entree Leadership. What is that?
It is like a Christian-based business owners that get on and just talking about leadership, different leaderships. And I also will watch Red Rocks Church out of Colorado. They have quite a few locations in the Colorado area, as well as men and women in bars and one other one. I forget what it is. But
Oh, really?
those are things that I listen to.
Okay, cool.
I watch their tech tour on YouTube.
Oh, no way.
I'm a big geek, and I like to watch everybody's toys they get to work with.
Which one, Paul?
I think it's Red Rocks, right?
Red Rocks.
Yep.
Colorado. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know anything about the church. I just know I seen the tech tour video of it. It's pretty cool.
Really? All right.
Yep.
Cool. Well, I listen to. I've got a bunch, so I'll kind of pick and choose 2 or 3. Levi turned me on. I'd say at least a year ago. Revived Thoughts. A couple of Levi's college classmates have a podcast, and they recreate famous sermons from history. And so that is really cool. To just different people will grab a really well-known sermon. Maybe the most famous one is "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," and recreate it so we can imagine that we're actually listening to it. And I really enjoy that one and what those guys do. My favorite comedian, Nate Bargatze, has a Nateland podcast that I like to listen to. Kurt has a podcast. We mentioned that last week. But quite a while ago, I was having lunch with Kurt, and he mentioned Hillsdale Dialogues. And I like listening to Larry Arnn. And I'm just going to mention one more. It's probably the one that's closest in format to what we're doing. Like Trees Walking is out of Minnesota, and it's a pastor. His name is David Berge, and his co-host is Mike Nelson. And I first learned about Mike Nelson from the comedy show Mystery Science Theater 3000. Have you ever heard of that, Jeremy, or seen it?
That dates me a little bit, doesn't it?
Yes or no? Do you know it?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're in the movie theater. And
Exactly.
Little guy, robots in there.
Yeah. So the second host of that, like the first host, his name was Joel. The guy who replaced him, Mike Nelson, is a Christian and loves Christian apologetics. And so these two guys, they do it maybe not quite once a week. It just kind of depends, but they do an apologetics topic, and then they do some funny formats as well. And so those are just some that I enjoy. So we're going to dive in. If you've been kind of following us, you know that we're trying to do a format and trying to not do a format all at once. And the last couple of weeks, we've done interviews with some really neat people. Brett Kunkel, which we just released our interview with Brett today. And last week, we recorded an interview with Katie Faust of Them Before Us. I'm hoping to release that next week. But we want to do some interviews if somebody who's really interesting is able to come on. But we also just want to be conversational. And so today, I want to kind of circle back to something. Paul and I did a podcast a few weeks ago on the problem of evil. And we actually taught on that in the worldview class that we're doing. And the day that we taught on it, we simply ran out of time. And there were a few things that I wanted to discuss and just didn't have time in the class. And I thought, well, let's just do a podcast on it. And so that's kind of the target that we're trying to hit today. Jeremy, I don't even remember. Were you in class that day? There was a week that you were gone. What do you remember from class?
There was 3 questions on the board that you put up. If God is good. I can't remember it all the way. Actually, you know what? I have it written down.
Do you?
Yeah. Give me a minute here.
I'm kind of interested to hear too, because I am not in the class.
Right.
So I'm completely in the dark. Is there any I guess never mind. Jeremy will do it now. I was going to ask for like a little recap or some important points, but
Yeah, that's what we're doing. And just for the
Jeremy's
record,
gonna do that.
Paul is busy that hour. It's not like he's banned or anything. You could come, in theory, Paul, if you wanted to. So,
But if I did come, you'd probably ban me. So, but no, I am
we
fairly
have
busy.
a pretty strict code of conduct in there, so you'd have to shape up a little bit.
I did not write it down.
That's all right.
I have failed you, JJ.
That's all right. So, do you want me to recap it for you?
Yes.
Just to refresh your memory. So, yeah, it's this classic argument against God's existence, or at least it's meant to disprove the God of the Bible. And it goes like this. There's an initial premise. If God is all-powerful, he could prevent evil. And if God is all good, he would prevent evil. But we know clearly that evil exists. Therefore, God is either not all good or not all powerful. Therefore, the God of the Bible does not exist. Either atheism is true or some other kind of theism that isn't biblical is true. That's the objection that a fair number of Christians stumble over. And we ran at it from multiple angles. Partly, one of the main centerpieces of our response to it was we looked at the book of Job. And if you look there, you can see that the Bible tells us that God is up to something often far beyond what we can envision. And our best efforts to understand God or to demand that God give an explanation for himself fall short. One of the most poignant moments in that book is when Job does sort of slide into demanding an answer from God.
Mm-hmm.
And God says, I don't owe you an answer. He says, stand up straight. Do you want an answer? And then says, where were you when I created the heavens? Where were you when I designed all this? Do you have any idea what kind of who I am that I can create all this? And you're going to put me on trial?
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't even answer himself. He just says, who are you to put me in the dock? And like that, if we're going to put God in the dock like this, we better be as ready as Job was to receive that. And when Job did receive it, he was humbled. He was content not to receive an answer. And there's a whole bunch more going on in the book of Job, but that's just one of the things that really stands out to me, that on some level, we don't even have a right to ask this question. But on another level, I think it is good to have a response to it. So that's kind of what I want to do today, is hit some of the things that either we didn't cover fully in class. So does that trigger some memories of class or some thoughts, Jeremy? Okay.
Yeah, I remember that. I just didn't have it vocalized correctly.
That's all right. What else do you remember from class that day? I know we showed sorry, I'm going to let you talk.
Okay, I think a big thing from class is, can I tell the story about my friend from high school?
Yeah, this is going out internationally, so if you need to change any details, you can. In case they live in the Bahamas now, you want to be careful.
Should we use a fake name?
That's
or something?
yeah.
I'll use friend from high school.
John Doe.
That's fine. That's fine. So what? Yeah, I think you've told me the story, but go ahead.
So yeah, and I think a large part of it is everyone was looking for a rebuttal on how to explain how God is good, even though problems happened.
Mm-hmm.
And for my friend, he grew up in a household with a not so good dad, and brother was in a gang, and mom was just a really, really, really nice person. And not too long ago, I just called him out of the blue just to see how he's doing, and was not too long after I was saved, so I was just kind of tell him all this cool stuff. And he just said, I don't believe in God anymore. I just don't believe that a God, if there is a God, he can do something bad like that to my mom. And a rebuttal for me wouldn't be like, well, like, let me open this scripture page for you, because it would have been a smack in the face to him. So it was more of, I can understand why you would feel that way, and had compassion for him. Mm-hmm. And trying to push that conversation into another area would have been a bad idea. So it just like, I couldn't explain a lot to him at that time to help him through that. But
Yeah, and I think, and that's okay. I think that your response as an ambassador in that moment, it's not easy to do all the time, but if someone does present this objection or challenge to a Christian, one of the things that you need to discern as best you can is this an intellectual challenge? Like, is this somebody who's really curious about the answer? And sometimes that's the case. And sometimes it's just coming from a place of deep pain.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things we talked about in class, one of the things that Scripture says in Romans is to weep with those who weep. And so to just love somebody in the midst of their pain is a huge part of being a Christ follower. And there may be a time to answer the objection, but we need to discern when that time is. And sometimes it's just time to kind of earn the right to be heard and earn the right to speak into a situation. A lot of times that means just shutting up. D.A. Carson said from the book of Job, the one thing that Job's friends got right is the 7 days they spent just sitting with him. He's like they got a lot of things wrong, but initially they grieved with him for 7 days, and that's something good that they did. So yeah, that's kind of a starting point, is discerning, is this a coming from a place of heart level pain, or is someone looking for an intellectual answer? And we could talk at length. Each of us here, so many people we know have gone through hard things, and part of this world is where our souls are formed, and a big part of life is just learning how to navigate hard situations. The tough stuff we've been through, we can look back and say, that person was very helpful to me. That person was not very helpful to me. And we should maybe do a podcast on that sometime. But I mean, I want to just honor that reality, but I do want to take some time to talk about some of the other, if somebody really wants a satisfying response to this question, I wanted to take some time to do that. And so I've kind of got 4 areas I want to go into today. One of them, and we did cover this in class a little bit, but I'm actually going to skip to point 2 real quick, because we already touched on it in class, and most of our viewers are already attending the class, but we do know that pain can be redeemed, right? You can maybe think of your own example. The examples that I've given are playing the scales on the piano. Like, that's not like major suffering, but it's not fun. It's uncomfortable, but there's a payoff on the backside. The ability to perform music, to enjoy music, to create music for the enjoyment of others. That little bit of pain from learning the scales is absolutely redeemed. The concert pianist who performs and gives delight to people and perhaps performs for the glory of God would say, playing the scales was worth it. Having my mom force me to practice for 30 minutes a day was worth it. I'm really thankful for that discomfort.
I have never seen scales on a piano.
Is that not a thing? This is my level of musicality. Is scales not for the piano?
I don't know what it's called.
I'm not a musician.
There is scales, but it's
okay.
like, I don't know what you call it. It might be the same thing, like playing the musical keys in order or whatever.
I'm trying to understand. I'm picturing a piano and like scales coming out of it.
Okay, we're going to get canceled by the piano community, which again is great, because for where we're at in the podcast hierarchy, all publicity is good publicity. So
as long as Pastor Travis doesn't watch this.
If Travis gets mad, we'll bring him on to give a rebuttal. So
please comment below.
Comment below if you want Pastor Travis to come complain about us.
Okay, but just let's
sorry.
Refocus, gentlemen. Refocus, centering. So it could be music practice. It could be lifting weights. It could be the tragedy that kept you from your dream college, enabled you to meet your spouse. We're kind of going up the ranks, right? And sometimes how the pain's going to be redeemed. I'm planning to go to the fitness center after we record. I know ahead of time how the discomfort there is going to pay off. Other times we know from experience how discomfort did pay off, even though we didn't understand it in the moment. And I think that one of the intellectual responses is, so the pain that we don't understand, what good might come out of our government's response to the COVID pandemic, which a lot of people have serious questions about the appropriateness of that. But we can pull back and say, God is doing something. In fact, he promises that he is. Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. He doesn't then say, go to this website and look up the individual thing to find out how I'm redeeming it. He says I'm going to. And so we can walk in hope, knowing that he will, knowing that he has, and knowing that he will. So that's one response that I would give. Another one, so back up to point one, you guys, is a kind of a non-response, because this is the road I've traveled in a lot of apologetic circles. And again, I invite interaction on this because I hope other Christian apologists will watch this and might have a different perspective. Send me a note. Let's talk. I'm not trying to squash anybody, but one of the common responses to this is what's called the free will defense, or the idea that God could not create free creatures without the possibility of evil, and therefore, evil is impossible without freedom. And there may be some philosophical truth to that, but I don't find a couple issues. One, I don't find that in Scripture. I don't see in the Bible, hey, here's how God justifies or explains why he has created a world that has evil in it. So I'm a little cautious with that one. But the other thing is, if you offer that up, it does not give an accounting for all of the kinds of evil in the world. For example, if a tornado levels a city, like how does the free will defense respond to that? It doesn't. Whose free will created that tornado, right? Now,
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was just about ready to argue with you in my head.
Okay, go ahead.
About just what you already said, the free will thing, but the tornado example is pretty good to disprove what I was going to say.
Okay, well, I read your mind and I wanted to get ahead of you. So, no. So, when that kind of thing happens, now you go on like a climate scientist or certain climate alarmists would say, well, we did create the tornado. Let's all quit using fossil fuels. But I think the burden of proof is back on them, and we won't get derailed by that. But the existence of natural evil, tornadoes and earthquakes and things like that, do not stem from anyone's free will. And the other is just what kind of comfort is that to, for example, an abuse victim? The idea that it's okay because your tormentor, your abuser, was using their free will, and God couldn't. As a pastor, I could not say that to somebody, and so I'm not. So that's my, in my judgment, I try not to go with that free will defense for that reason. So there might be some little bit of validity to it, but it's not a place that I like to go. So thoughts, guys? What looking for a response?
Well, I think it comes back to too, like even the weather. Just what you said earlier about we don't know the outcome of what's going to happen in the future, and we maybe never will. Mm-hmm. But if there is an earthquake or tornado or whatever, the world is so sensitive with, like, I don't even remember all the specs, but just everything. One little thing can change with the rotation and the distance from the sun and everything else, that it could change everything. So what's to say that tornado or earthquake isn't needed for another purpose we don't know about, just in the world in general, in nature. And then also that, but if somebody gets hurt, we don't know how God's using that on, same reason you or I could get hurt, like how is God going to use that in other people's lives, or the teamwork and connection of picking up afterwards, that type of thing.
Yeah, that's what I was
Mm-hmm.
gonna count on too, Paul. Usually when things like that happen, it brings people together, like in a
Yeah.
good way,
Yep.
to help out the situation, and you can make some different connections in those regards when there is a disaster like that.
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, and that goes back to point 2, which I turned into point 1, which is that we see instances where that pain can be redeemed. Even if it's in any number of ways. For example, I think it was summer of '93. My family farm got hit by a tornado, and thankfully the house was spared. Nobody got hurt, but we had a big equipment shed that was leveled, and we went out the next day, and there was like a 2x4 that had been driven through the window of one of our tractors, but the window was still intact, like it didn't shatter. Like somehow it hit so hard that it punctured a window without, and you see images like that, and to understand the mover behind that, the creator who has that power in the palm of his hand, is something that can push you to worship. Now, that's like one example. I know that, again, we do not want to be in position of shrugging off immense pain. You hear about tornadoes and tsunamis and how much misery they create. And when we see that, and when we notice that, it should be grief. It shouldn't be, hey guys, guess what? You got to see God's power, you lucky dog. I mean, that's not weeping with those who weep, right?
Yeah.
So I do want to be extremely careful how we talk about this, but there is a spectrum of ways to look at it. So, but let's look at that. We are almost at 28 minutes. It's been all sanity, but a couple other things, as you can see, I want to cover. One of them is, one of them is just to unpack the objection. The statement, there is evil in the world, is a true statement, and everyone agrees on it, Christian and non-Christian. And one thing that I've found is that agreement, if you're talking to someone, if you can help them see that you and them, you might disagree on a million things about the nature of God and the nature of salvation and that kind of thing, but I guarantee you they will agree on the existence of evil. And if they don't, like some will say they don't, you might meet someone who says actually evil is an illusion, or evil is all about your perspective. But it doesn't take that much work to get them to see that they don't really believe that. If you run into that type of a person who may have been influenced by an Eastern worldview or whatever, now don't really do this, okay? But do something like, and I got this from Greg Kokel, the apologist, but he said steal their stereo. Okay, if somebody says evil doesn't exist, grab their iPhone and just say thanks and start walking. Jeremy, what's their response going to be if you do that?
You'd give me my phone.
Okay.
I'm going to be mad.
Right. They are going to be mad, right? Yeah. And so as they get mad, now you're playing with them, and they know you're playing, but you're making them think, right? Mm-hmm. You're making, and why are you mad? And so insist that they give a response, right? And they could, like, they might be trying to defend their position, say, well, I don't prefer that. And then you say, well, I do prefer taking it. So what do we do? How do we judge? And they're going to be stuck, because if they're going to insist that there is no evil, then you're right. Your illustration is right. Like, there's no way to break the tie between your preference and theirs. But deep down, it says in Romans that the law is written on our hearts. Deep down, they know that you're doing something wrong. Deep down, they know that you are committing an act of evil. Now it's an illustration. You're, again, do not steal, but you're trying to show them, oh, there are some things that I do not want people to do to me, and it's not just a preference. It's because they know that it's wicked, right? And so you can surface that, and then you can say, if they'll come along for the ride with you, if they'll admit, oh, there really is evil, and then take them by the hand, not literally, but say, so what is the standard? What is when do we call something evil? And you don't have to get all the answers to that, but you can kind of help somebody understand, what do you not want done to you? I don't want somebody to shoot me in the head, right? And I can extrapolate from that I know that murder is evil. I don't want somebody to steal my iPhone, so I know that that theft is evil. I don't want to be publicly humiliated in any form, so I know that cruelty is evil. You can start to develop, hey, we have a common ground for what evil is. And then you say, how do we account for that? How do you explain that that there really is a standard by which we can call some things evil, right? And if somebody can see that, and in my judgment, it's obvious that we can see it, then to give an accounting for that, we have to say, so what is that? Now we could say, well, that's just a feeling that we have. Well, if it's just a feeling, I mean, feelings are subjective, right? And so you could say, so the serial killer who doesn't feel bad when they murder somebody, does that make it okay? We know that it does not. Like, you can say it, but you know you're saying something that doesn't square with reality as we experience it, right? And so just because we don't like a thing, that's not enough to call it evil. We have to see that there's a real immaterial law, and that has to be connected to the character of a lawgiver. Now, we could talk more extensively about this, but what I'm doing is, if you can slow the conversation down, you can help the person see that the problem of evil is actually an argument for the existence of the God of the Bible, a holy God who says, I want the world to be this way and not this way because I'm good. And when it doesn't operate the way that I have decreed, that is not good. And my creatures deep down know it. And then you want to, of course, move them beyond just the existence of God to the gospel itself, to the fact that not only can we just know that it's out there, that there is evil, but then move on, make it very personal and say, have you done evil? Have you stolen? Have you murdered? Have you felt like murdering, but you didn't because it wasn't socially acceptable, but you would have if you could have gotten away with it? And so that takes the concept of evil from being out here and moves it to, not only does evil exist, but I have personified it and I'm in a bad place. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do to undo the evil I've done, right? I can't balance the books. I can't, for whatever acts of lust I've committed, it doesn't even things out if I don't lust for that many days going forward, any more than if OJ, well, it's a bad example because he was found not guilty, but somebody who's found guilty says, Your Honor, I'll balance the books. Yesterday or last week I murdered somebody. I'll go for a year without murdering somebody and balance the books. Does it work that way?
No.
Of course not. One murder makes you a murderer. And so that wrongdoing can't just be undone. It has to be atoned for. And that's what happens on the cross. And that brings us to our fourth point, is the fact that this universe was created to reveal the glory of God and to reveal everything about God that he wants known about himself. And there's at least one thing that we could not know about God apart from the existence of evil. Okay. And I'd like to illustrate it this way. Jeremy, if I tell you I love you, Paul, if I tell you I love you, do you believe me? It's not a trick.
Yes.
Okay.
Like right now or before I knew you?
Let's see. I'm thinking of all the insults I've hurled at you right now.
Yes.
Okay.
I believe that you love me, JJ.
Okay. All right. So God in his word says that he loves us, right? And we can believe it. He could point to the existence of mountains or the existence of babies or that our hands function or whatever. Okay. But it says in his word, no greater love has any man shown than he laid down his life for his friends. And there's all sorts of passages like that. But the greatest act of love is when Jesus went to the cross for his enemies, which would be the three of us and billions more, right? Now, if evil had not entered the world, would we know that about the character of God?
If evil have not entered the world, will we know that about the character of God?
Right. That's kind of the core question that I want to get at. If evil had not entered the world, would we know the extent that God is willing to go to undo evil?
No.
Which is the cross itself. God himself dying on the cross to pay for the sins of us, who our sins are greater than we can imagine, right? And so ultimately, the problem of evil is, I believe, and I don't want to be trite about this, but is solved by having an understanding of the cross and the reality that God didn't distance himself from the evil that's in the world, but he was the recipient of the greatest act of evil of all time to show us what he is like. If evil does not enter the world, we do not know what God is like. We can take his word for it, but he didn't just tell us, he showed us. And we know deep down that showing is more powerful than telling. And so that's the fourth point that I like to make about this, is that apart from the existence of evil, we could not fully know the extent to which God cares for sinners, loves his enemies, is willing to, the extent he's willing to go to care for his children. And then I can process my whole life through that lens. If God is willing to die for me, then whatever happens to me when I walk out that door, he can redeem that as well, coming back to that previous point. And so that is, kind of in my cumulative experience, that's how I come at that. And this is, as you can see, when we ran out of time in class that day, this is what I wanted to get to.
Gotcha.
And so I kind of wanted to make this available to people. Obviously, there's a whole bunch more that could be said. I kind of took over there because I had a series of thoughts that I really wanted to get out there. So
I felt like I was in class, Paul. How about you?
Yeah, I did. Okay. See, it's okay for me to miss it because I'm in it right now.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So we're going to make this available to the class. Anybody who wants to listen. And that's kind of all I got for today, guys. Any other final thoughts?
I think a lot of the times when you're going, like no one's going through a bad time and saying, yes, God is growing me. Like you're like because obviously God will allow you to go to a bad time to allow you to grow, but never have I been in a bad time and called my buddy and said, guys, guess what? I'm going through a hard time. It's time to grow. Because it's hard to understand what's really going on. And I had a really hard project that we were doing, and we had a really hard person we were working with. And I didn't blame God for it, but I didn't want to be in that situation either. And it wasn't until a year after that I fully understood how he was growing me and how he was making me stronger. And that's wisdom. And you have to go through those things to gain that wisdom. And at the time, I didn't I didn't like it at all, but I knew that I was being grown and making me a better person too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting how you said, if evil doesn't enter the world, we don't know what God is like. I never heard it like that. That's a really and that's awesome how that's put too.
Yeah, and that's not my creation, but it's our understanding of, we see hints of it in Scripture where the cross is designed to reveal the glory of God, and if we know that truth, like we can take that truth on faith, but then you simply look back and say, oh, but had evil not entered the world, we would not know that,
Mm-hmm.
sort of like like in a marriage, is your wife likes to hear that you love her, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you were to give her a kidney or the ultimate act, take a bullet for her, like that is a much more powerful, when love costs you something, it is a far more powerful demonstration of love. And so when the God of the universe died for us, that is the ultimate demonstration of love and power and glory and everything else about God. And it's so much more different than just him telling us.
Mm-hmm.
He showed us. It says in Scripture, God shows his love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. So having that grasp, there are so many questions that are solved by the cross, and it brings up so many mysteries, but also reveals so much as well.
I don't know why, but it reminds me of in youth group we were I forget where we were reading, but when Lazarus died,
mm-hmm.
and Jesus wept about it,
mm-hmm.
knowing and Jesus himself was sad about it, knowing in the next couple minutes he was going to raise him from the dead. But I don't know why that just made me think about that, because he was going through a hard time himself, knowing
right.
full well that in another 2 minutes he was going to raise him back from the dead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a whole new flow of thought, but I think I got it from Lewis. But if you told somehow, if a preborn baby could understand, if you told a baby in the womb, hey, you're gonna experience this and this, this and this and this, would you do it? And be like, no, absolutely not. That sounds horrible. Whereas God did fully grasp what he was about to go through, and it was more pain and misery and isolation and rejection than the rest of humanity combined, and he chose it. That is unthinkable. God is amazing, and when we don't think it's amazing, it's because we're not thinking about who he is and what he's actually done. And so again, you don't get that without the problem of evil. So is this a hard nut to crack, so to speak, from an intellectual standpoint? It can be, because when you encounter something awful, when you really have to stare it in the face, it really does. Like, I get the question, you read about some of the atrocities in history, just some of the unthinkable things that for the most part here in the West we've been spared of, and this is something that I mentioned, I think, on the last podcast, or at least in class, but we are incredibly comfortable, and yet we're the most quick to accuse God of evil, and it's like that doesn't square. If the problem of evil was a genuine problem, then it would show up more where there's more suffering. But it actually shows up more the more comfortable we get. And I think our comfort, I'm confident in saying our comfort makes us complacent and kind of makes our thinking shallow and soft. And it's like, well, I've got a comfortable life. Somehow I'm owed this. And when people go through pain, or like, I'm not owed anything.
Mm-hmm.
And discomfort increases our level of gratitude and our humility and our willingness to consider that maybe our strong opinions aren't as correct as we think they are. So, yeah, it all fits. And so that's why I have, 2 podcasts, 1 class session diving into this, because it is so, these issues are so fundamental to our understanding of God and the world. And so that's why we're taking so much time on it. So, but I think we've taken enough time. If you've been hanging in there with us, we appreciate it. We're thankful that you've been watching. Thank you that you've been listening. We clearly haven't exhausted the topic. Send us a comment, a question, a disagreement. 28 Minutes of Sanity at gmail.com. Follow us on Twitter at 28min of sanity. Jeremy, thank you for being here today. Will you come back sometime? Is this okay?
Of course.
All right. So we're going to get Jeremy back. Paul, will you come back sometime?
No, this might be my last one.
Oh, man. Then it's the last one for all of us. So we'll talk to you guys next time. Thanks for being here. Bye.